Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome again to another podcast episode on Talk Architecture. And I'm your host, Naziaty Muhammad Yaqub. I wrote an article on Substack referring to a few articles earlier that I read on AI literacy. And I wanted to find out about the future school, which led me to finding out about the future school of architecture. And to be frank, I am kind of disturbed because, coupled with observations and interviews that I've had with, shall we say, current academics, I am concerned about the future School of Architecture. In this article that I did, it says that the future School of Architecture is pointing in the wrong direction. So I want to discuss artificial intelligence and specifically AI literacy in architecture education. So the article that I have been reviewing and commenting on was some article that was written a year ago or so by Edwin Armago, published on 20th June 2025. The title was AI Literacy is Not Enough, Why the Future of Talent Depends on Human Complementarity. I think it's a worthwhile article to comment on, and it's necessary to read that in view of the future School of Architecture and how it is envisioned by institutions. Also because AI is more advanced and we can figure out what had happened in the last year or so and how there is a situation in which there is lack of understanding about the problem in architecture education. So the reference for the Future School of Architecture was articles by the Union of the International Architects or International Union of Architects, IUA or Union. Well, it's always UIA rather than the other way around. So there is a global survey that revealed about the future of architecture education. That was also published in 2025, but later than the other article in November. So that survey conclusions referred to a research article where it is published this year. And how that was referred to that is there is something in which, shall we say, a speculation about how architecture would negotiate artificial intelligence. And that speculation is based on the fact that the ability that architects need to have is to know how to do AI craft prompting, whatever that is, and to adopt the logic system of AI. Just like that. This research article also explicitly explicitly talk about the application of AI technology in the field of architectural design to construct a three-stage model: imitation, exploration, and creation, which gives me a lot of distress because of the word imitation. Now, I just like to go through this Substack article that I have written and try to explain further in this podcast episode my concerns. So I'm adding another layer to the discussion in which I put out the basic article by asking a lot of questions. So the International Union of Architects defines the future school of architecture as shifting away from manual drafting. That in itself is of concern. Why don't you have manual drafting anymore? Meaning that why don't you, I mean, when we talk about manual drafting, we're talking about the skill to draw manually, which is a necessary skill, as a foundational skill and core competency of an architectural student. The ability to actually use your hands, psychomotor skills, and to do the cognitive skills as well for a student of architecture to create, to ask questions, to observe. First, to observe and to ask questions and to come up with a problem at hand, maybe a building type issue in which there is a pace that a process that is required in order to actually, shall we say, characterize or build up that identity as an architect. Now, that's why I'm concerned with this shifting away from manual drafting, because I have had discussions when I was in architecture school as an academic staff, hearing people wanting first year students to start with digital drawing. Just like that. They don't actually give arguments about why is it important, what are the processes in architecture education. It's like for the sake of argument, or for the sake of pushing an agenda, which I don't know why there is one. So shift away from manual drafting and basic software training. So why do you shift away from basic software training? It's like there is an idea that you don't start as an apprentice, you just become a master straight away. And this is going against education. So it goes towards complex systems thinking. Okay, systems thinking. System thinking is a good thing rather than piecemeal design thinking. And that in itself is a huge um, subject to understand. There's a lot of, when this statement comes out that UIA state like that, there's a lot of gaps. There's a lot of questions to be asked. So shift towards complex systems thinking, artificial intelligence, integration, and climate responsible design. It's like an area in architecture that everyone need to go to. The, shall we say, the idea is entrenched in the heads or in the minds of the UIA instigators, or shall we say, leaders that influence a lot of conference proceedings, a lot of thoughts on architecture education. Like, I want to say greenwashing, which relates to whitewashing. It's like, this is, we have to do this. We can't be backwards. We got to go forwards. And this is the vision. This is the idea. And whose idea, whose vision, and what other research involved. It's just based on a survey, and then you add your own ideas. And it doesn't sound like architecture. Looking at that closely, you will notice that it has, like I said, it has nothing to do with architecture. It could be about anything to do with building or with the construction industry in general. So we're talking about architecture education. And if that is about the construction industry and what is going on, then how do architecture fit into all that? So architecture just needs to follow that. So it goes further where as AI automates rendering and modeling, tomorrow's institutions are to prioritize material science, environmental data, structural logic, and collaborative hybrid learning spaces. As someone concerned with the social inclusion side of architecture, like myself, with the bread and butter of designing with space and function in mind, I am worried about this. And then when I read the core shifts in curriculum, there's further than this that has been stated in UIA articles, that beyond software, less focus on learning basic digital drawing tools, higher emphasis on systems logic and AI prompt crafting, not craft prompting, sorry, prompt crafting, along with systems, materials, collaborative studios. So you see, there are so many ways to go about tackling artificial intelligence But why this way? Why this specific themes? Why this vision? It's like you're selling this vision. You come to a conclusion that this is the right vision. And this is dangerous because, shall we say, tired and overworked academic staff who are, shall we say, not able to actually debate and argue about this because there's a lack of time to do so in the specific universities and faculties and School of Architecture, obviously, would take the UIA vision as something that is a fact or the truth, but is far from the truth. So why this vision? It's not architectural. And does that worry you? You out there, are you worried about this? Please tell me if you're not worried about it, that you have some arguments that you think that this is the way forward. I'm just using the words that are in the article and expressing my concern. So what I did was to chase down on this quote, systems logic and AI prompt crafting. When looking, what is this and how is it in architecture education curriculum? And I found that systems logic and AI prompt crafting are the new foundations of architecture education, shifting the student's role from a manual draftsperson to a high-level director of technology. So you going away from the apprenticeship, going away from the idea or the model, the traditional model. Of course, we're no more in the Renaissance period or in even the 19th or the 20th century. We're moving towards 21st century and artificial intelligence, but we haven't really understood the importance of manual drafting. So, or being a manual draftsperson before you become a master. Here you want students of architecture to directly become a high-level director of technology. But when people ask me, I got like a comment from an architect who agree in general what I'm saying about the future school being going in the wrong direction. They agree, but based on the limited observation, they say they do feel that the future of school follow the path of the architecture industry. If the industry itself pushes using AI, school normally follows suit to prepare students for the industry. What my concern is, architecture education does different things. They are separately, shall we say, they have separate goals and aims than the industry, basically. This is an observation that I've noticed. My argument is that you're right that architecture school follows the industry, but architecture education here seems to have a mind of its own and is not following the industry. Industry practices do require students of architecture to be competent in the basic foundations of architecture, not to be a high-level director of technology. coming into practice. Because underlying all the AI tools, underlying all the digital architecture softwares, is the understanding of what architecture is about in terms of manually drafting it. There is no shortcut. Here you have the UIA advocating for shortcuts. Its evidence is very, very, shall we say, clear, not clear, but obvious, right? What is this? And it's not about architecture. And can you all see that a high-level directive of technology, as artificial intelligence automates repetitive drawing tasks, schools use these concepts to teach students how to control complex data and guide AI to generate viable buildings. Control complex data. Now, there's a lot of data out there, right, that we have to negotiate. Environmental science, construction, structural design, aesthetics, space planning, and all that. It's one way of thinking about architecture that is pursuing this idea, in which you don't recognize that you are, it's not all the same problems with different types of buildings. It is not a generic problem. It is context specificity. And it's necessary for the architect to go to the site and understand those specificities. And when you design, the brain itself, the architect's brain, have to deal with a lot of things at one time. And with collaboration, you come up with a design that's suiting to that particular specific context. So what it is you can't generalize thing. And the way you're doing this is, using AI to control complex data and to guide AI to generate viable buildings. Remember the 3-stage process of AI prompt crafting. Imitate. Where do you imitate from? You use previous forms to come out with something, form making. It is not really, it is designing inside out, it's designing from the outside in. And that has a lot of issues there with regard to actually coming up with the best, no, identifying the right problems to solve. So the process is flawed. So here we have the imitate part, and then you have the explore part, which is just basically putting input, which is to do with the data on environmental science and structure, and then you will create. But it's not creativity; it's just to generate from computer data. So as a user of such buildings, you do find that they're kind of artificial. That's what it is, really, artificial intelligence. They're not having those tactile or haptic feel to certain things. I suppose big business and big budgets with no time to spare and needing to be based on reputation rather than responsibility will take over, and you generate all this enclosures based on imitation, and you will have the built environment lacking in the nuances that you want to find in a good building, you know what I mean? So this follows that we went to this paper, and let me go and state again, from imitation to creation, AI innovation path for architectural design teaching in a new era. So even as abstract, it's enough for you to understand that about the three-stage model of imitation, exploration, creation, centered on cultivating students' creative thinking and innovative ability with the goals of AI literacy cultivation, digital twin practice, and interdisciplinary collaboration. When it illustrates about a library design and the old building renovation as teaching examples with real-time feedback, intelligent assessment, and full process traceability. So the research concludes that multimodal generation, immersive interaction, and full cycle simulation are reconstructing the core logic of architectural design education, transforming the teaching mode from imitation to creation, and building a talent cultivation system adapted to the future of the construction industry. So I do wonder what that is all about. When students of architecture abandons manual drafting in order to become a director of technology, the core competencies, the whole business of architecture design is at stake here. So where is the system taking us? Now I'll put the AI literacy article next to it, the one I talked about earlier. The future school has already been envisioned in our heads by the UIA. This is what it is going to look like, and here is a piece from a year ago raising concerns from that article on AI literacy. It came from a moderated discussion at the University of Wollongong in Dubai, opening with a deceptively simple question: what does it mean to be AI literate in 2025? So that before we get there, the author says we should ask what we mean by artificial intelligence. The term collapses a wide range of systems, from predictive model to generative agents, into a single catch-all, masking how differently each one functions. So one should read this article, and it's a good one. The best is this quote on the technical journalist Karen Howe, who observes that the word AI often obscures more than it reveals. Like the word transportation. A word that sounds singular but refers to an entire ecosystem of modes, roads, and rules. When you think about transportation, you think about different agencies, you think about collaborations or not collaborations, you think about standards, you think about design standards, actually. Also, efficiency, and there are a lot of systems going on, or integrated or not. And when they're not integrated, there's always this problem of connectivity. So when you think about transportation and you think about AI, likewise, AI is not a single technology, but a socio-technical system that carries information, mediates decisions, and reshape how we learn, work, and relate to the world. So in the industry, it's fine. The industry has to do what it has to do, but why do we educate students of architecture not to still be doing manual drafting? Still to be using the brains more for contextual specific design. still not getting the students into the core competencies of sketching, observation, and finding out the design problem. So this is about architecture education and its remoteness from the industry, as opposed to the argument that says that what I'm trying to do is to argue against industry. No, asking, I'm actually doing what the other person is concerned, thinking about architecture education in a way that how you learn at the beginning is different than how you actually practice. And there are certain skills that you think that if you don't do those skills, but here UIA state that you move away from basic digital architecture, uh, basic computation to go straight into AI. So this is even more concerning. So this in turn raised a deeper question: where is that system taking us? And in the debates now going on about talent, meaning student of architecture, how do we define and teach AI literacy in a way that prepare them not just to use these systems, but to think critically about them and alongside them? So that was this point that I want to talk about from the AI literacy article, where learning requires friction. I quoted in my Facebook post this particular line from the article that says, too often AI is positioned as a shortcut, but learning requires friction and thinking takes time. In the rush to prepare students for a tech-driven job market, we risk stripping away the very skills that make them resilient, critical, and creative. So in order for us to prepare graduates to go into the industry, they need to be resilient, critical, and creative. And how are they able to do that? By actually learning basic core competencies, going back to observation and understanding architecture and sketching and doing manual drafting, slowly building up their knowledge in computational drawing later on. But in the first few years, getting students to actually be much more critical thinker, explorative in the sense that they use physical models, require them to ask questions earlier on and be much more better at asking questions later on when they are swamped or when they have to adopt digital technology, in which they have to be the director of technology. Before being that director, they need to actually go from the basic, from the beginning. They can't just jump into being a director and just start prompting in AI prompt crafting or whatever you call it. So there are options. There are choices to be made by students of architecture. They are not just automatons. So friction is exactly what we have been teaching students of architecture all these years. They try something, they figure out manually, there is a crit. Sometimes we debate it, sometimes students get it, sometimes not, and they try again. It takes time. So the skills of being resilient, critical, and creative that's stated in the AI literacy article is being denied by the UIA Future School Vision. So we come to this point where the approach, we disagree with the approach by UIA, looking at also the other article that is reflected in UIA's vision about imitation, exploration, and creation. So remember that students need the bread and butter of architecture education is the crit, and people coming in to crit students. That's very important to have dialogues and conversations in architecture about the design problem. And then you understand that the architecture student need to understand what is the architecture identity, why architecture is needed in the industry. And, there will be no more architects, really. There'll be just people pushing the AI prompting craft thing. So this is the problem because universities, they don't see teaching as important anymore. The crits, they just want the wow factor by the student to emerge some sort of form making exercise of imitation, exploration, the form, only the form, input in the space. So that's just, logical. No emotion, just pushing the buttons, generate the forms and get the wow factor out. You don't need crits. You just present it. Now you're an architecture student. You're fit in the industry. But the industry demand that you actually understood what architecture is, because then what is the architect in the industry, really? Just AI prompt crafters. So to call the problem with the UIA's vision of the future school, imitation, then exploration. What sort of exploration? The concern is AI literacy. This is not controlling AI. This is taking a shortcut through the learning, arriving at a solution without ever understanding the problem. So are we teaching the next generation to think? Where is the thinking? Or just to prompt? And you can see in the UIA model, it talks about prompts. It says you must be able to prompt well. Higher emphasis on system logic and AI prompt crafting is a frightening thing to think about. And this is the clash. The clash is that becoming crafty at prompting, which is away from being the architect. And AI literacy article said that you have to understand the fundamentals before you can play with them, whether it's jazz, architecture, or writing. The same goes for AI. Without strong cognitive foundations, it becomes a crutch and not a catalyst. That's why I'm saying a shortcut to success. And it is not a success, actually. The questions I kept asking is, I will repeat them. What are the skills that make people resilient, critical, and creative? And I ask about designing from first principles. Why not don't use AI at all at the beginning of any university degree? Because if AI is considered a crutch, then we are letting people be handicapped by over-reliance on it early on. And what's the outcome of that handicap? This is actually quite cynical of me. These are shortcuts to success. But what kind of success? What is it that we are gaining and what is it that we are losing? And I feel that we're losing more than we gain. So students of architecture need to be taught in the correct manner, in the right way, so they can think better rather than using AI as a crutch. We need to guide them properly, and that is the issue right here, right now. So we need to resist this. The call to action is to resist this. Schools of architecture need to be knowing about what is happening and resist it, because once you throw out some subjects from your curriculum and once you allow 0% teaching KPIs and you are not, you have abandoned the way that you've been doing things, just because of a perception by a few people in some international institution, you are going in the wrong direction. There are people out there guiding architecture schools towards the wrong things. We need to resist it. If we don't, our students will not be able to cope. They will not be able to fulfill the characteristics of an architect and hold enough confidence, enough knowledge, enough skill for the industry, and they will be bullied further and further. Architects will not be respected because they are not needed in the industry, because they are AI prompt crafters. They're not architects. So that's all I wish to say. I hope that this gives you understanding about this topic. And it is trying to stop things from being ruined, because architecture education is seen differently than architecture practice, and that's the problem. This is what's going on in schools of architecture. There are schools of architecture that resist this, we know, but maybe they can afford to resist it. We have to look at architecture education in the 21st century in a different way, and not just whitewashing or greenwashing it. Thank you very much.